Hello and welcome back to another edition of Between Two Consultants. My name's Ethan Silvers.
And I'm Nicholas Kelly.
It's very exciting. We're coming at you live today. So our guest, Victoria, don't be too nervous. We're professionals. We're going to make sure that everything goes super smoothly. Today we are going to be talking about employee burnout, and Nick is going to be walking us through how we can quickly get to some really good metrics. And Victoria has very kindly agreed to join us. Victoria, do you want to briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me on. Victoria Blanshteyn. I'm an organizational psychologist by training, and I work within workforce analytics and employee insights.
We're just going to dive straight into this, and we want to give the example of how easy it is to do dashboarding and wireframing and to get some ideas on paper. And Victoria, thanks so much for joining us. We're going to be focusing on the HR manager for this one, so we'll just get straight into it. You can see we've got our usual approach here. So in the highly unlikely event that you haven't seen all the episodes where we're doing the wireframing, we follow a specific approach where we want to go look at who we're designing for in terms of who are the stakeholders, so who are the business stakeholders that are involved, and who are the actual end consumers of any insight that we're going to be designing for. And then there's this whole process that we follow, that we figure out what questions we want to be able to answer with the data, and then we move on to actually wireframing. But what we're going to do today is we're going to fast track all of that. We're just going to focus on who we're designing for, and so we're going to briefly talk about who it is we're designing for, in this case a HR manager. We'll pick off some of the challenges that they have and what are their goals. And this is going to be in the confines of what we're talking about in terms of employee burnout. So we're not going to be designing a whole HR workforce composition, diversity, attrition, recruitment, retention type dashboard. We're going to be looking at one aspect of that, which is a hot topic these days as people are moving around with COVID, remote versus going back to the office versus hybrid models. And the intent of this dashboard is to help inform us with this extra piece of information that we need to tackle. How are people and employees getting burnt out? So let's start there. We're going to start with our HR manager, so as who we're designing for.
And as you're writing that down, just quick thank you to the hand model who we searched high and wide for. Really doing a phenomenal job. Yeah, a lovely lady who we hired to do the hand model.
Yeah, very good, and I appreciate that. Appreciate the hand model, and no expense spared, of course. And
no expense spared.
Yeah, we actually have the hand model in the International Space Station, just to show the technological depth that we're able to have with a live stream like this, which is
quite remarkable. Yeah, we sent them up there just like a few days ago. I think they landed.
That's right. No expense spared. So we've got our HR manager. Victoria, could I ask you for one challenge that a HR manager faces in terms of burnout and insight into burnout? What can they see? What can they not see? Are there any specific challenges that they're facing these days?
They have trouble pinpointing the exact roots of burnout because there's so many of them.
Okay. Roots of burnout, let's say. Cool.
So the root cause.
Okay. So we're lacking that bit of information. What does the HR manager need to do, basically? If they can understand the root cause, then they can maybe start taking some steps to address those. So if I were to flip that on the other side and pick off a goal, now of course if we're doing this exhaustively, we try and pick off a few more challenges, of course. But one goal that a HR manager would have in relation to burnout. And if I could be so bold, Victoria, I would. Can I suggest one maybe we can do a couple here. I'll suggest one is to reduce attrition. That might be one that we could pick off.
And do we want to say something as simple as, what is the goal? Our goal is to reduce burnout.
There you go. That's a good one. And hopefully everyone can read my writing there.
Nick, as our hand model is writing, should we continue talking about goals and having Victoria throw a few more at us? Victoria, what are your thoughts? What are some other goals from the perspective of an HR manager?
Keeping employees happy.
Yeah, and I agree with that, Victoria. I do my best to keep Nick happy as my employee. I think I'm nailing it. Like, look at that smile.
Looks happy.
Yeah. Keep my. All right, so we have reduce attrition, reduce burnout, keeping employees happy. Nick, how many are we going for?
I think this is good. I think we got enough going on here, and where we can start getting over to wireframing, and it's just to give you an example of like how quick this can be. But this is a step we really don't want to miss, right? So like, if you want to be as light as possible on requirements, you have to have this as a minimum. We have to know who we're designing for, some challenges they face, and some of the goals that they want to get out of the dashboard. So whatever we wireframe now in the next step needs to align with these goals. It has to, the information and the insight we're given has to support those goals. So what I'm going to do is something quite innovative here. I'm going to take these sticky notes, these goals, and I'm going to move this off here. And we have
Has this ever been done before? We're getting rid of the board.
Getting rid of the board. It's crazy. No structure now.
Oh my, I'm nervous. Victoria, don't worry, but I'm nervous.
So we have our goals. Okay, so we're going to keep those at the top. And what we're going to try and do here is we're going to come up with a few visuals that are going to help us design towards those goals. So let me just put out a few now. Okay, so we'll just say, okay, imagine these are going to be charts, and we're going to have a few charts laid out over here. And let's just start with 4. And it's a nice number to start with, and just like, okay, well, what are we doing? What are we trying to achieve here? And let me start with the first one, which it's going to be not a terribly wild guess, because we're looking at some of the challenges that you'd mentioned. One of the challenges you mentioned there, Victoria, was not knowing what the causes of burnout are. So let's just say we'd have a visual which is going to be causes of burnout, or burnout causes. And let's just say we're just going to have a basic bar chart which is just going to list the top causes for burnout. Simple as that. So we got one there. How about another chart? Is there anything that comes to mind for you, Victoria? Like, you're thinking here in the HR manager's mindset. What would they want to see in terms of what do I need to know to align with these goals? Keeping employees happy, reducing attrition, reducing burnout.
And so what you're asking for, Nick, is just what are the actual, like, in addition to the causes of burnout, what are the other things that we'd want to measure?
Yeah.
And these probably are some of the causes, but an HR manager would want to know some self-report data. So think about your employee survey, right? What are employees saying in terms of workload and work-life balance, for example?
Okay, got it. Perfect. So kind of like I think you talked about this before, like sentiment.
Yeah.
Right, coming out
exactly.
of the surveys. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
And Victoria, is that similar when we talk about employee sentiment to sort of like employee satisfaction?
Yes, I mean different depending on what you're asking employees, that's what you're going to get out of it. So you could include general satisfaction as part of your survey. You could have it focused on well-being, whatever it is that's top of mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I could have what I just threw in there was just like maybe there's a word cloud, right? Just something that captures some of that feedback you're getting out of your survey, and then maybe there's something more specific around maybe themes, sentiment themes, sentiment topics, right? Those kind of top topics that are emerging out of that. So we could have like a kind of deep dive on the word cloud and a more broader kind of categorical view of sentiment by themes. It's only a coincidence that I don't talk during the while the hand model is writing.
I think you're just being very respectful of the hand model and the hand model's craft, making sure that like all the attention is being spent on that. I don't have that same courtesy. I save all my courtesy for my employee, Nick Kelly, so that he feels valued.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay, so we've got a reasonable structure going on here already. So we've got our causes. So we just think about what the HR manager is going to look at. So they could come here onto this dashboard. Okay, I can see what are the main causes. I can see what the employees are saying, like direct verbatims of what they're saying, and I can see some themes that are emerging. And if I was to take a guess on what themes might be coming up, it might be commute, it might be work-life balance. Maybe these are the types of topics that are coming up. For a HR manager, Victoria, you know a whole lot better than I would here on this one. Would they care about, like, say, the row level detail? Like, okay, who are the employees? Now, and of course, there's going to be a bit of a challenge here with private information, anonymous data. If we wanted to filter down and drill down a little bit and say, okay, well, which employees are getting burnt out?
At aggregated level, for sure. And they would want, and aside from that sentiment part, you'd want to see actual behaviors, right? What are these employees doing, right? Not at individual level. What is Victoria doing at 6 p.m. in the evening, but what are employees doing? And if they're taking meetings at night or similar behaviors, right?
So we could say activities and behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
So in that, Victoria, would that be part of the reason to get that? Would it be to say, hey, there are these behaviors among these employees, and this set of employees, their sentiment around or their happiness is low, and so these behaviors seem to correlate to this, so we need to look into that. Is that, Jen?
Yeah, I mean, if your sales group in Singapore is telling you that they're burnt out, their well-being is low, and then you see that these people are working on average 10 hours a week post hours, or are in emails from on the weekends, right? You can kind of correlate that and say, well, clearly they're behaving in a certain way, whether it's, depends on the job, but that's leading to these unfavorable outcomes. And what can I as an HR manager do from standpoint of policy?
Yeah, and for that very reason, Victoria, I capped Nick's hours at no more than 16 hours a day, and certainly no more than 8 hours a day on the weekend.
And my children greatly appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be 10 hours a day. Nick unionized, brought it down to 8 hours on the weekends, and now 16 hours during the weekday. And I think that's worked out pretty well for you, right, Nick?
It's great. I mean, I liken it to Tiny Tim and Scrooge. That sort of relationship. And look, it's a journey of learning for Ethan, and hopefully some degree of enlightenment.
Yeah. I mean, on the weekend we might even go down to 7.5 hours a day.
Very, very benevolent. As you were talking, Victoria, a few of the other things you'd called out. We've got the employee behaviors and activities. I also added in hours worked as one of those things you might correlate with some behavior. But I made it a trend line, so we want to see if it's changing over time. Right, so how has it been historically? Also, to your point, you'd want to see it at an aggregated level. So we can't do employee. I always love to try and get to like a row level detail here, and I don't think we can. But maybe by department, could we do some breakout by department?
Yeah, you can break it up by department. You can break it up by various demographics, right? If it's large enough department or organization, you can break it up by like hierarchy levels or pay grade levels, right? To get into like where are you having more issues.
Love it.
And Nick, just to let you know, and this is really feedback for the hand model, the contrast of what the marker on the paper is a little bit hard for the viewers to see. So just we might want to repeat things at times for what's on there.
It's the sun coming through the solar module.
That makes a lot of sense. We didn't account for that, did we?
Yeah,
Next time.
Probably should have done a dry run.
Yeah.
We've asked the hand model to use a darker pen.
Yeah, thank you, hand model, for doing that. Yeah, it's much appreciated. It's something we'll bring up now that she is an additional. I mean, now I have layers, so she reports to Nick, Nick reports to me. So Nick, just some feedback to handle in private.
Yeah, I think we probably reduce the spend on getting the hand model to the International Space Station, and probably focus a little more on the use of pen and color and contrast.
Yeah, I don't know. I like the whole space station thing. I think it's a good niche idea.
Yeah, who doesn't? No one's doing that, and it's part of the reason we have so many viewers.
Yeah, I mean, Victoria is probably thrown through a loop that all this is happening in space. We probably should have brought that up beforehand. Victoria, we actually talked about sending you into space with the hand model, like as part of the incentive package.
Is it one way?
Do you want it to be one way?
Depends on the day.
Yeah, I mean, there's a petition right now for Jeff Bezos for him to stay up there.
Right.
Disclaimer: I don't condemn or condone that. Nick, what are we doing now?
I'm doing one of the items that Victoria just called out was a demographic breakdown, and so we're getting more to the so what. So okay, well, what are you going to do about it? So let's say a HR manager comes in and looks at this and goes, okay, I can see the causes of the burnout, and I can see what the employees are saying, like direct verbatims what they're saying, but also grouping that into themes and topics that are emerging. And that's all fine. Okay, but great. So what are you going to do about it? Well, I can then see what activities they're doing, and maybe there's some activities that are more correlated with burnout than others. So I can filter on any of these, of course. And I can see how that relationship works with the amount of time employees are spending working, as well as then a breakout by department and a demographic breakdown. So I can really get into some degree of nuance here. And Victoria, I know you talked about this before, and there's probably like a view from, we're probably getting there with departmental view to a degree, but like, is there a manager view, like a span of control? Is there someone, is there a group of people that have a certain supervisor or manager that tend to get more burned out than others?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like with that hierarchy. Only you could look at hierarchy by managers, right, to see where those issues lie.
Got it. So let's say reporting structure.
And Victoria, how much of this, would you anticipate would be targeted in the sense of, hey, there's this group of people that we really need to make sure are feeling the love, or do you think it would be more general than that?
My preference is usually for any interventions to be general, not to single out a particular group. But if you see something different within a particular group, getting down to root causes of why it's a certain way, right? Is it the nature of your job? Are they supporting another group in a different time zone? Is it expected, right? So understanding all those things before rushing into any intervention, I think.
Yes, and that is exactly why I ended up capping Nick hours per day at 16. Very targeted.
It gives me time to sleep, which is great. Much appreciated.
That's right.
Get in a healthy 8 hours of sleep there. So if we look at this, if we look at what we've crafted here, and Victoria, you had just said this, how do we get to root causes? So we can do that in two directions here. We can start with, okay, well, I want to see, I can filter by department right away. So I can say, oh, look, this department has the highest burnout. I'm going to click on that. And then it's going to update everything here. So then we can see, well, oh, look, the burnout causes are different for this department. And maybe I click another department and I can see, oh, the burnout causes change. And the sentiment's really different. There's different themes and topics coming out from the surveys for that specific department. And so there's many ways then we can look at this and decide what action needs to be taken so that HR manager is better equipped to deal with burnout. Anything else we feel like? Do we think we have the main bases covered here with these visuals?
I think we did.
Would you say it's one of the best wireframes you've seen in your life?
It's the best.
Awesome.
Wow. And that's what you get when you cap employee hours at 16 per day.
There's no endorsement from Victoria on that. I appreciate that, Victoria. Thank you. Food for thought, Ethan. Food for thought there. Yeah, so this has been great. This is like a very light activity that anyone can be doing before you start building a dashboard, and it's going to deal with like so many things that come up as barriers and issues down the road when a dashboard is actually built and developed. So you can see how easy it is.
Yeah. And Nick, before we sign off, do you want to just spend like a moment recapping the process that we went through, what we started with and how we got here, and just walking through the yellow Post-its that you got?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started with figuring out who we're designing for, and we said, okay, that's the HR manager. And that's been the anchor point then for everything we do. We're not going to design something for a chief HR officer. We're not designing something for a finance manager. And it becomes an easy way to disqualify certain types of questions we want to answer in the dashboard. Because the temptation is to answer everything under the sun. And the challenge for the person building a dashboard can be, well, it seems that you're asking for a lot of things here. And so we use the persona as a way to sort of address trying to build something for everyone. Just say, look, we're designing for the HR manager, so let's make sure we have that hat on. And then we started looking at some of the challenges, but more importantly, what are the goals that we wanted to have for that HR manager? And we can look at these and we can say, okay, keep my employees happy, reducing attrition, and reducing burnout. And this dashboard seems to address I now know the levers that need to be pulled to reduce burnout, which would naturally have an impact on attrition if I can address them, which then also helps us keep employees happy. And so using those goals, we went through just a simple conversation to understand what would we need to see in order to anchor to those goals. And you can see how straightforward it is. The only thing that might get a little bit tricky for folks is picking the right chart, but you can see how simple the charts are here. You don't have to get complicated with it. Most of them are bar charts, either horizontal, vertical. You're usually going to end up with some sort of trend over time. And invariably, if it's me designing it, I want to get some level detail. It might work for us exactly in this case, because of the sensitivity of the information. But you can see here, we don't have to get complex. We don't have to have fancy charts. Start somewhere. Start, with things that are very, very simple, easy to understand by everyone. And you can figure out complicated charts later on if it's appropriate. But this is enough to get us started.
And that's lovely. And just a quick question for Victoria. I think it'll be quick. And a lot of what Nick talks about when doing dashboarding and visual analytics is how it's actionable. Victoria, do you have any thoughts in terms of looking what's here, and then when you get the data, how that down the road could be actionable for an HR manager?
Yeah, I think that it is actionable or could be actionable, right? If you see that, you have a lot of people sending emails late in the evening, there are all of these kinds of programs that have, warning signs and saying, do you really need to see it to send it right now? Can you wait until tomorrow morning? So, a lot of companies have started using that. The other thing that has gotten pretty popular is like no meeting days where you can actually get your work done. And the big one is corporate shutdowns, right? Where you force people to take time off and where they don't feel punished after their vacation because they come back to 300 emails. So I think all of these things can provide some actionable information.
Yeah, and it's really interesting about the no meeting days. For Nick, I give him no meeting Sundays, and he's responded very positively to that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, I could do so many things. I prepare for my work week then on Sunday. It gives me that bit of space.
Victoria, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. This was fun.
My name is Ethan Silvers.
I'm Nicholas Kelly.
Thank you all so much for joining us on this edition of Between Two Consultants. Take care.
Bye.